Hey guys, welcome back. In this series, I'm going to build a simple website for a fictional coffee shop using Node.js and Express, of course, and deployed on Turbo, naturally. The coffee shop won't be real, but the project itself will be pretty full-featured, so that you can use it for a real project or a real shop if you want. Maybe you're building a site for a friend or for your own business. This project should be good enough to handle that. The only thing it won't include is an actual checkouts flow. So that you won't be able to process payments at the end of this tutorial, but I will create another tutorial just for that because that gets pretty involved. We will include a content management system, or a CMS for short, where the admin of the website can add new menu items perhaps. So for example, if you want to introduce a new flavor of coffee, or perhaps you want to start selling pastries or food or something like that, the CMS will be good for that. Just to make sure you're the right person for this tutorial, or this tutorial is right for you, this is a beginner Node.js and Express tutorial, but it's not a beginner programming tutorial. So if you've never programmed before, then this is a bit too soon for that. You should check out one of my more beginner tutorials on the website, specifically Intro to Node.js and Express, and that'll give you a good foundation for a lot of the project-based tutorials we do on this site. You're going to need Node.js, obviously, and an account on Turbo so that you can deploy. These things are all free, and that should be good enough to go. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing you want to do is make sure you have everything you need to run the project. So like I was saying earlier, make sure you have Node.js installed. I like to use the LTS, but some people like to download the current. Really up to you. But just make sure you have a Node runtime. And then again, make sure you have an account on Turbo. This is the website. You can head over here and scroll to the bottom to sign up for free. This is a free site, so you don't have to worry about payment. There are paid features you can sign up for later on, but you can continue using the site for free for as long as you want. So once you have all that ready to go, go ahead and open up your terminal. I'm just going to move some things around. I'm going to move this over to there. Okay, so open up your terminal and then cd to the desktop, or wherever you do your programming work. I'm just using my desktop, and type in the following: node-v, to make sure you have an up-to-date version of Node. So I'm running 12.18.3. Also do an npm-v as well, just to make sure you have an npm properly installed. The Node package manager for installing packages. Once you've signed up for Turbo, you will need the Turbo CLI, or the command line interface, which is really a tool that helps you deploy projects to the Turbo hosting environment. So without that, you cannot deploy. So the way you install the Turbo CLI is you do sudo npm install -g turbo-cli. Now if you're running on a Windows machine, I'm pretty sure you don't need the sudo. I'm using a Mac. Mac and Linux, I'm pretty sure you do need the sudo. So make sure you understand the difference. If you're using sudo here, it's going to ask you for your system password. This is not your Turbo password, this is your system password. So just type that in, and then it will install the Turbo package globally onto your local environment, which is what we want. So once that's done, check the Turbo version by doing Turbo version, like that. And I'm running, I just downloaded 0.39.3. If you have an older version, like 0.38 or something like that, you want to run this command again. It means you have an outdated version. If you're watching this video later on and your version is higher than this, perhaps 0.40, it's fine. You should be good to go. So this is everything we need to basically do the entire project. Let's go ahead and let's go and get started. So first thing we want to do is scaffold our project. So we're going to use the Turbo CLI scaffolding engine for that, which gives us a very bare bones Node and Express project out of the box with a few basic configuration options set. So for example, it uses the mustache templating engine. It sets the static directory and things like that. But for the most part, it's a very bare bones Node Express project. Let's go ahead and set that up. So the way you do that is Turbo, new, and we're going to call this coffee shop. And here is where it creates the the scaffold. It generates the project. Don't worry about these next steps. We'll just do these together. So cd into the project that we just created. And let's open this up in our text editor. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code, so you're free to use whatever you want, but I'm a big fan of VS Code. And here is the project that is scaffolded for us by the Turbo CLI. Like I said, it's a very bare bones Node Express project, so it has all the minimal pieces of you would expect to see in a Node project. So we have our package.json, which is where we declare our running scripts and our dependencies. App.js, where we import the routes and set the paths and things like that, and apply middleware, all that good stuff. Our views directory for our templates, route, public, folder for our static assets, so forth and so on. Let's go ahead and run the npm install so that we can install our dependencies, and this usually takes about a minute or so. So while that's going, let's head over to the app.js just to make sure we understand how the project is currently configured. So we have our basic Express imports up here, some basic configuration here. You can see how the views directory is set, the static directory is set for public. This is some middleware for actually doing the configuration options. This basically gives us all the basic configuration. You can remove this if you want, if you have your own preferences, like maybe you want to use a different templating engine, but then you'd have to go and set all that up. So here's where all the meat and bones is. This is where we import our route files and set the paths for these routes. We're going to remove all this though, and excuse me, use our own routing instead. So, but before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at what the project gives us out of the box. So the npm install is done now, so we installed our dependencies, and you can see those over here in the node modules. So now all we need to do is run the project locally, so we can do npm run serve. And if you look at the package.json, you'll see that I'm using this command right here on line 8, which gives us the dev server. So we can run npm run serve, and it's going to run the Turbo dev server on localhost 3000. So if we open this up in our browser, we should see the scaffolded website, which is this right here. This is just a very basic intro template. So that means everything worked. So let's go ahead and turn this off, Control C. And let's go ahead and send this up onto the server just to make sure everything works properly on the server as well. So over in your, actually before I do that, what you need to do is in your Turbo CLI, you want to do turbo login, and then log into the account you created on Turbo this time. So you want to use your Turbo email and password. Oops, wrong password. Okay, great. And then once you've done that, head over to your Turbo account where you signed up over here and bounce to your account page. And then you should see this on your account page where you can set your name, your username, your bio, stuff like that. I'm going to create a new site here called Coffee Shop. And really what this is doing is creating some server space where you can deploy your project. So by doing this, I've basically created some space on the server where I can go ahead and deploy on the Turbo hosting environment. So we're going to do that real quick just to make sure everything works on local and on the remote. So we're going to need the site ID and the API key in a moment. So we do turbo connect over here, and what this command does is it connects our local source code to the remote environment we want to use, which is going to be the site we just created over here. So we need to grab the site ID and then enter the API key. That's this guy over here. And then you should see this message meaning that it worked. So we can just do turbo deploy, that's this command right here. And this will throw the source code from our local environment to our remote hosting environment. And that way we can quickly make sure that everything is properly working and we're good to go both locally and on the remote, so that we can be confident that what we develop on our computer is what we will see on the server. So when this is done, we can go ahead and check the server real quick, and that'll be this URL right here. And this is our staging URL, so we can just copy and paste this into another tab in the browser. And now we see the same thing here as we saw on localhost. So it's the same site, except this time it's running on the staging server, which means everything works the same on the remote as on staging. As on local, which means we are good to go. So let's go ahead and actually get started. So now the next thing we need is the actual template we're going to use to add our UI, to set the UI, the visual components of our project. So we're going to use a default template called Qcina right here. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can download this in the YouTube description. If you're watching this on the actual Turbo site, you can download this on the tutorial page where you're watching this from, and it'll be exactly this zip file. So once you download this zip file, go ahead and unzip it, of course, and then you will see this folder right here. And this is basically just a collection of HTML files and CSS and JavaScript and images and things like that, which gives you basically a website interface right out of the box. So we have our index HTML right here, and this is going to be the template we use to establish our page or our website visual configuration. So let's go ahead and start throwing this guy into our site, and we can then make sure that our site looks nice like this one. So we have our coffee shop source code right here. And if I head over to my actual code right here, an important thing to understand is that the public directory over here is where the CSS, the static assets are determined. So we have our CSS, images, JavaScript, all that stuff. So we don't want to use these, the scaffold out of the box. We want to use the stuff from the Qcina project. So if we open up the Qcina template, you'll see we have CSS, font, images, basically all the static assets are over here, especially if you group these by folder. So really all we need to do is move these directories over into the public directory over here. And we will then be importing the static assets. So we just basically moved all of these files, the static folders, excuse me, into the public directory of our project. So now we have all the CSS, images, JavaScripts, etc. Now we need the actual HTML, which comprises the template, which I closed. So I'll open that up again later. So that's this page right here, the index HTML. So let's go ahead and set that up. So what we need to do is inside of our coffee shop project, head over to the app.js. Let's get rid of these routes because these are the ones that come with the scaffold. We don't want to use any of these. We want to use our own routes. Actually, I'm just going to comment these out. So we can do const, and I'm going to create a new route called main, and that will be imported from the routes folder, and it will be called main.js, the main.js route. So we have a routes folder right here with two routes, API and index. That's these two guys right here, but we want to create our own called main.js. So, and then we want to use that instead of the API or the index. So here we're telling the app to import the main.js route and then use that for the home page request. That's this line right here, line 27, the main path. So this won't work yet because we didn't create the routes. Let's go ahead and start doing that. So inside the route file, the route folder, we want to create a main.js, and inside here we want to set up the actual route. So let's go ahead and import Express. This is going to be an Express router, of course, so let's go ahead and set that up. So that's going to be called router, and it's Express. It's a function called router. Always export it right here. because it's very easy to forget that. And then right now what we want to do is set up a get handler for the home page, which takes a request, response, and a next argument. So again, I might be moving a little fast here. If you're completely new to Node and Express, I'm probably moving a bit quickly. So if this is completely foreign to you right now, you check out one of my beginner Node.js and Express tutorials, the intro to Node.js and Express specifically, where I really break down the pieces that we're going through right here. So right now what I'm doing first is I'm just going to send back a string request. This is the main route. And then now we have our route set up with sending back a string request. And then now we can actually test this. So we can go back here to the terminal and do npm run serve. And we should now see the string output from the main route we just set up. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's confirm that. So this is the main route. There we go. So turn that guy off. Now let's head over to, this is now, we can go ahead and chuck this. And index and API, I'm just going to delete these because they'll just get in the way. Okay, so we don't want to show just this raw string. We want to show the actual home page, right? So that's the actual HTML template. So that's going to be in the views directory. The templates are stored in the views directory. And again, that's set in the config over here, views. So if we had another directory instead, we can say templates. If we want to create a new folder for templates and store all the templates in there, but we're not going to do that. So inside here, we want to create a new template for the home page. So I'm going to call it exactly that. So home.mustache. And I'm going to just, well, rather than copy and paste that, I'm going to open up the Qcina. And we're going to use the index.html here. Let's open that up in our code editor. Let's copy all of this and paste it into our home.mustache file. So we just copied and pasted from the Qcina template theme, I should say, the theme, and pasted it over into our project, specifically the home.mustache template. So once that's done, we can now go back to our main.js route and tell it to render the home template, which is this mustache file right here. So let's go ahead and try that now on localhost. And let's see if we get the theme, which we do. So now we're running the theme on localhost. We have all the images, all the CSS, all the animations are properly showing up. That's because we imported the static assets initially. Probably should have done that second, but either way. So this whole thing is now properly integrated in terms of the template, the home template, and the static assets. Let's go ahead and throw this up on the staging server just to make sure it works on staging as well. This way we can be confident that everything we're doing locally is accurately reflected on the staging server. Because obviously that's where it really matters. Okay, let's go ahead and check the staging URL and let's see what we get over there. Same thing. Okay, so everything is properly reflected on the staging server as well as localhost. as we see on localhost. So now we're really in business. Now we can actually go ahead and start reconfiguring this theme for our site, our coffee shop. So let's get into it. So let's see here. Where should we begin? So in the main.js route, we are rendering the home template, which is really just spitting out this HTML, and then that's it, right? So let's begin by taking this title tag and the head tag, and let's change that to Joe's Coffee House. And let's see that show up properly on localhost. Okay, so on localhost, we now have Joe's Coffee House, right? And then that means we should change it over here as well. So let's go ahead and make that change. I'm going to leave the server running this time because it is watching for changes. So we can do Joe's Coffee House. And then here, and then if we go to the bottom, you'll see on the footer there's one more instance of QC now. So we can go to the bottom where there's the footer, and then we should find this right here and change that to Joe's Coffee House. And then let's make sure that that shows up properly, which it does. Great. So this is good to go. So now what we want to do is take advantage of the actual templating engine to render this data, because maybe Joe's Coffee House, he changes it to Joe's House of Coffee one day, and you don't want to have to change it in 10 different locations. So what we want to do is we want to create a data object, and we want to actually insert the data here. And then we can pass that data object into the template rendering engine, and then Mustache will do the rest. Keep in mind we gave the key value, the key here is title, and the value is Joe's Coffee House. So what we want to do now is head back to our template, and then we want to use the Mustache templating engine syntax to render that value instead. So it's going to be title here in double curly braces, and that's the Mustache syntax. And then don't forget to do it over in the other spots as well. So we want to take advantage of the templating engine as much as we can. This makes life a lot easier and a lot faster for changes down the road. So, so now we can reload and we'll see the same thing, Joe's Coffee House, so forth and so on. But like I was saying, maybe Joe wants to change his name to Joe's House of Coffee one day. So we can just change it right here in one spot like that, and then it should update in all the locations. So Joe's House of Coffee in all 3 spots. So really we want to take advantage of this as much as we can. Whoops, that shouldn't be there. Okay, so that's good to go. So let's go ahead and keep on making some changes for Joe's Coffee House instead of all this basic configuration, imagery, and content from the theme itself. So let's say right here, let's change that to a key called description in here in the data. So description, welcome to my house of coffee. Let's go with R. We hope you enjoy our broad selection of premium coffee from all over the world. Okay, so now we have another key called description. So if we want to change this to the description key, we just go to the bottom where all that stuff is, and using the same templating engine syntax, the Mustache templating engine syntax, we can just put in description like that, and we should see the new value that we just typed in over here. So that's good to go. Now it may seem like we don't really need to do that in this case because there's only that one spot, but if we go to the top in the head tag, typically there's a meta tag called description. Whoops. Name description. And then value. And then if we reload and check the head tag, you'll see this meta tag right here and with the value that we have for description. This is really good for like basic SEO stuff. It's not really that important, but if you are doing this kind of development for clients, they're going to ask for stuff like this. Okay, cool. So that's good to go. Let's start carving up our template, our home template, into what's called partials. So let me explain what that is. If we look at this over here, you'll see certain components of this page that are generic to the entire website. So here's what I mean by that. Like this website header, this navigation header, excuse me, right here is something that would show up on every page of the site. So if we have a blog page, which hopefully we'll have soon, as well as a menu page, this nav header will show up on all those pages. The same can be said for the footer right here. This should show up on every page on the site. Also, a couple of the non-visual components, like the head tag, should show up on every page of the site. Should be in every page of the site, as well as these JavaScript imports on the bottom of the page. So rather than copying and pasting those over into every single page, which is it's really not really, it's kind of a sloppy practice, we want to use what's called partials, which are files that we can insert in every page, which represent entire chunks of HTML. It'll make more sense when we actually do it. So here in the views directory, I'm going to create a new directory, a subdirectory in the views directory called partials. And inside the partials directory, I'm going to create a new file called nav.mustache. And it's important to understand that these are just mustache template files. So if I go to the top of the home mustache template, the home, and if you scroll down a bit, you'll see there's a nav HTML tag, which is the nav bar. So if I highlight and copy this whole thing, if I actually just cut it entirely, I just removed it, right? So if I reload the page, you'll see that the nav bar is now gone, right? Because that makes sense because I removed it. So if I paste that into the mustache file, the nav.partial file, excuse me, nav.mustache partial file, I've created a partial where I can insert this chunk of HTML pretty much wherever I want to by using this double curly brace syntax again, but this time you want to add a little caret right there and then the name of the partial. So this is called nav because that's the file name right here. So if I reload the page now, the navigation bar has been restored. But the important thing to recognize here is that we are using a partial. So this one line of code right here, line 32, actually represents all of this right here, all 16, 17 lines right here. So the nice thing is when we create more pages and add more functionality to the site, we can just insert this template using this nav partial rather than writing all 17 lines of code. So we really want to take advantage of that. It's an important thing. It's an important concept. This really cuts down on repetitiveness of coding. So in the partial, I'm going to create another one called footer. And this partial will be responsible for the footer section on the bottom of pages. So let's head back to the home.mustache. The footer is on the bottom. You'll see it right here. It's actually called a footer tag. So if we scroll to the bottom, right here where it closes, we can just grab that and just cut it. And then in the footer partial file, just paste that guy in. So make sure it looks like this. And then I'm going to reload. And you'll see that the footer is now gone, right? We removed it. But now let's restore it using the partial. So if we go back to our home mustache, we can just do that. I'm going to put this loader in the footer as well. It's all the way on the bottom. Okay, so now if I reload, there it is. So even better. So now you may recall I mentioned we should do the same thing with these JavaScript imports. So I'm going to call these scripts. So this will be scripts dot mustache. And let's go back to our home template. Let's grab these guys. And then this time I'm going to just go ahead and do the import right away. And then inside these scripts, partial, just paste that guy in. And then the last one I'm going to do is the head tag partial. And if we go to the top, I'm going to grab the internal components of the head tag and replace that with head. The reason I'm not grabbing the entire tag is because sometimes for individual pages I make small tweaks within the head tag, so I can just add those over here if I wanted to. So inside the head tag we can just do that, and that's going to give us our head partial. So now if I reload the page, basically you're not going to see anything different visually, at least you shouldn't. It should be the same. That's kind of the idea here. But our code is much more navigable on the home template file, the home mustache file. And anything that's left behind, any content that's left behind, theoretically should be specific to the home page. So all the code you're seeing here should basically be code that is supposed to only be on the home page, or at least, or better yet, not on every single page. That's probably the best way to put it. So that's the idea behind using partials. It's just better organization. So I'm going to do a quick deploy. This time I will pause the video so that you don't have to watch it deploy. So let's Control C. I'm going to pause the video and do a quick deploy, just to make sure we confirm that everything works on the staging environment as it does on local. So go ahead and send this guy up to the staging environment. And while that's going, I'm just going to pause the video. Alrighty, the deployment is now done. Let's go ahead and copy and paste the staging URL into the tab. And we just want to confirm that we didn't make any major changes to the UI, or really any changes to the UI, other than it now says Joe's Coffee Shop. So once again, we're confirming that everything on the staging URL looks the same as it does on local. This is a good practice to get into, to do a lot of sort of frequent deploys, because sometimes, well, not really very often, it's pretty seldom, but occasionally something won't work quite right on the staging environment as it does on local, and you want to, obviously the staging environment is really where the rubber meets the road. You want to make sure everything is working on a live hosting environment. So, okay, so we're good to go. So let's see, let's start focusing on, I'm going to add one more page, so just so you can see how these partials really help us out in terms of making life a lot easier in terms of code, reusability, and organization. So let's go ahead and add a blog page. And if you open up the Kusina theme, you'll see that there is a blog page already. So let's open this up in the Visual Studio Editor, copy all the HTML and dump it into our blog mustache template. But this time, let's go ahead and replace the imports with our partials right away. And that will make life a lot easier when we want to make changes down the road. Okay, let's grab the head tag. And let's get rid of this nav tag and use the partial for that. Okay, so now we have a new template for the blog. However, we don't have a route set up for it. So let's go ahead and go back to our main.js route, and let's create another handler, a get handler, for the blog template, and then pass in argument, and then let's do res.render, and then blog. Now don't forget, we got to pass in this data. Otherwise, it won't have the data arguments inside the templating engine itself. And then let's go ahead and pass that in. And let's do a quick npm run serve. Now I have a feeling something is not going to import properly, but I think I know why, so it should be an easy fix. Oh, nope, I was wrong. Oh no, that's the home page. Let's go ahead and check out the blog page. Okay, so here's the blog page. Actually, it imported fine, so everything looks good here. And don't worry about this header, this black text header. That's because of this right here. Yeah, we'll have to take care of that in a minute. But otherwise, the import is good. So let's go back to our home page. And if you click on blog right here, it won't work because it's going to a blog.html. So what we want to do is head over to our nav partial right here, and you see where it says blog HTML. We want to get rid of that and do /blog. Now, notice how we only have to do that on one page, on one file, right here, and then it'll properly go, but this will properly be configured as well. So here's where the partial really helps us out, because we just have to make one change to one file and it propagated to all the other pages. In this case, there's only 2. Great, so that's good to go. Let's head back to the main.js route. Now, you may notice that we're using the same exact data object here and here on these 2 routes, and that's considered poor form. This is duplicate code. It's exactly the same in both cases. So that's not good. What we basically have here is a global configuration JSON data, basically a subset of data that's pertinent to the entire website. So it's a global configuration object essentially. So what we can do is create a single JSON file that will propagate to these two routes, as well as any other route that we add down the road. Essentially a global configuration. But luckily, the Turbo hosting environment gives us basically that option out of the box. So what we can do is create that. Well, let's just do it and you'll see how it works. So let's turn off the server. So what we want to do is create a new directory here at the top level called pages. It's the wrong spot. At the root level called pages. Inside the pages directory is where we can store JSON configuration for all the pages. That's why it's called pages. So here we want to create a global, this time a JSON object, global JSON. And inside the main.js route, we can just grab the JSON here and just paste it in here. Now, you're getting warnings here because in valid JSON form, the keys and values have to be strings, double quotation mark strings like that. So just be aware that otherwise it's not considered valid JSON. Now this is a global JSON object that's passed into our routes by the Turbo hosting environment, basically out of the box. It just gives it to you for free. So the way you grab it is, instead of creating our own data object, we can grab what's called the context from the request. And this context object right here will contain this global JSON object over here. And it will just give us the keys and values for free. So let's go ahead and confirm that. If we go to our, let's see the best spot, the nav.mustache. So instead of title here, we have to reference the global object. So we do global.title. So it gets passed into our request context underneath the global key. So if I go back to the nav mustache, we now have to do global.title. So let's go ahead and run the local server. And if I head back to the home page, you'll see that Joe's House of Coffee shows up properly here, but we lost it over here and down here on the footer because those partials are still referencing the actual normal keys. So what we need to do is head back to the other partials. So we had footer, and we have, instead of title, we're going to want global, and then the description as well, global. And then head over to the head tag, and then same thing. We have a title and a description, and that should be it. So let's go ahead and try that on local. And reload. Now we have Joe's House of Coffee everywhere we had it before, and the description, don't forget that. And that's much cleaner code because if you look at the route now, we just have one data object called the context being passed in. We could even just pass in the context directly if you want to. There's no reason why you couldn't do it like this. And now we're back down to a very stripped down, sort of bare bones route, and the data itself is right here in this global JSON file. It's a much cleaner separation of your code. That's what we call separation of concerns. We want to keep things as sort of isolated as possible so that whenever we make a change, we don't have to change it in 50 different locations. We can just change it in one, and then it propagates everywhere else. So once again, let's make sure that this works on the staging environment. So the way you configure your pages, so we added a pages directory with a global JSON configuration object. The way you have to update your remote hosting environment to be aware of that change. And the way you do that is you turn off your server and you do turbo page and then the name of the configuration object. You don't need the JSON extension. And this will basically, great. Now what's happening here is that it's just taking your contents from here and just putting it on the remote context. So you're basically just syncing up your context from here to the remote. So now what you can do is you can do turbo deploy again and make sure it works on the remote. So I'm going to go ahead and do another deploy, and I'll pause the video so you don't have to sit through this. Okay, the deployment is now up. So let's go ahead and check that out on the staging environment and make sure everything is still the same. Okay, looks good. Everything looks the same. We do have a new page for the blog. Let's go ahead and check that out. Looks good here. And let's go back to the home page. Whoops, we want to do home. So we just found a bug on the nav partial, by the way. So we want to fix that in a moment. But let's check out the home page. Now let's say Joe's House of Coffee. Let's say Joe wants to change it back to Joe's Coffee House. So this is a very common thing if you're working with clients or if you're just working with other people. They're oftentimes very indecisive. They're going to want to change back and forth. And the idea is you don't want that to be a big deal. You want that to be a quick sort of 1, 2, 3 type of thing. So if we want to change this back to Joe's Coffee House, instead of making a million changes in the code and redeploying and all that stuff, we can just take the global JSON and just do Joe's Coffee House like that. And then all you got to do is turbo page global. And that should take care of it on the remote as well, because this does sync up our context from local to remote. And that makes life a lot easier in terms of making very small changes like that. So so again, remember when you're doing this global command, you're just syncing up the remote context with your local context. And so you can make very small, quick changes like that propagate quickly, pretty much instantly, on the live environment, which is very convenient. So you don't have to do a million things to make a small change like that. Okay, great. So I'm going to wrap it up here for this first video. Got through a lot in this video. I moved a little bit fast, so like I said, if you're totally new to Node and Express, or even just programming in general, a lot of this is going to be a bit too soon. If you've never done any Node Express before, head over to Turbo 360 and check out the tutorials page and check out this one right here, Basic Node, JS, and Express. And this is the tutorial where I cover the real mechanics and the minutia behind everything I'm doing. I explain every single step. Like for example, what are these rec, res, next things, and how do I get the what does this context mean, and all that stuff, and how do I what does all this mean? Like line by line, I explain what all this stuff means. In this video, in this sort of sequence, I'm assuming you understand the basics of Node Express, Node.js and Express, and sort of putting together things in a more higher level. Just a more realistic situation. So hopefully that makes sense. In the next video, we're going to start working on the actual page content. So the actual contents for the home page, replacing all this stuff with coffee imagery, copy just for the Joe's Coffee House, the header and the text, all this good stuff. And then, and yeah, that's it. So hopefully that makes sense. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hello, and welcome back to our Node.js and Express tutorial here on Turbo 360. In the previous video, we set up the project, we implemented the theme, and started configuring the theme with our custom content for Joe's Coffee House. And then we did some deploys just to make sure everything worked on the staging server as well. So here's what we have as of the end of the last video. In this video, we're going to continue customizing the theme by integrating the content for this section and this section over here, and start customizing the content specifically for the home page rather than the entire site like we did in the last video. So let's get into it. So here is the code as of the end of the last video. I'm going to run the dev server and make sure everything still works properly. So here is what it looks like on localhost. And we're all set. So let's continue customizing the template, the home template. So here we have our partials, our nav partial, our head partial. And let's start customizing this top section over here, sometimes called the hero section. We have two slides. This is the first one and then the second one. Let's only use one for now just to keep it simple. But basically, if you want to use two, it's the same concepts apply to the second slide. So here is the hero section right here. The second slide begins over here. So let's go ahead and get rid of this one. Leaving one slide behind, and we have our content over here. Eat healthy and natural foods and all this stuff down here. So that would be this stuff over here. So let's get rid of this. Or let's change this to drink healthy and natural coffee. And let's change this to welcome to our coffee shop. We hope you enjoy our well, we don't want to just redo this, so let's change this to at Joe's House of Coffee. We only brew the freshest coffee from all around the world. We also serve pastries such as cupcakes and brownies. Okay, and let's make sure that that looks okay on the actual site. drink healthy and natural coffee at Joe's House of Coffee. All right, good. Okay, so let's see here. Just like before, we want to get this content from a data object that's passed into the rendering engine in the main route. So just like we passed in the context here, we want to do a similar thing with the content for the home mustache template. So luckily the Turbo context that's provided here also provides us a mechanism through which we can create JSON files that correspond to a template, and those JSON files will then be passed through into the template. So if we what that means is if we create a home JSON file in the pages folder, so home.json, and in here we create a JSON object, and let's create a header key for the header section, and then the header section is going to consist of let's call that a hero section, and then that's going to consist of a header text and a subtext. So this will be the header text and this will be the subtext. So let's call this header, and let's call it subtext. And the contents we had before in the template, we can just put those in here instead. Like that. And now this JSON file, this home JSON file, will automatically be passed to this home template because they have the same name. So we have home JSON and home mustache. So as a result of that, this will automatically get the home JSON contents. Now I want to be clear, this is a Turbo feature. It's not a Node Express default functionality. So this is something that comes out of the box by virtue of the Turbo environment. So this is part of the context, just like we did with the global from the previous video. So what that means is inside the home mustache, we can replace this with the placeholders, and it gets passed in under a key called page. So we have page, and then the page has a hero section, and then the hero section has a header text. And then we can do the same thing with the p text down here. So page, then hero, and then this one is subtext. So we are using this key right here to render the text down here. So, and I'm going to remove this button because we're not going to use it in this website. And if we run the serve, the local dev server, and we reload the site, we should now see drink healthy and natural coffee at Joe's House of Coffee, so forth and so on. And that means it worked. However, you may notice there is a BR tag here that's showing up, which we don't want to show up. It's actually part of the HTML. That's a line break that should, let's get rid of that, that should actually create a new line break down here. So we don't want it to actually show up as text like we're seeing right now. So what that means is we want to render the HTML, this part right here, we want to render as raw HTML instead of plain text. That's pretty easy. All you got to do is add a third curly brace, and in the mustache templating engine, that's how you render raw HTML rather than pure text. So if we go ahead and reload now, that line break should actually render as HTML. So we are now set to go. We have our header text and our subtext, and now we need to replace this image right here. So with something more relevant to the coffee shop. So I have a set of images I already prepared for this video. If you want to use it, you can download it in the description section. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on the Turbo website, it's also in the description, in the description for video 2. So you can go ahead and download the images folder right here, and it'll be a zip file. All you need to do is unzip it, and you'll find these 5 images that I prepared for this video, this section right here. So this background image over here is this one right here. Images slash, this should actually be a slash like that, bg_3 at JPEG. So we're going to replace that with barista JPEG. It's going to be this guy right here. So let's go ahead and import that into our project. So, and I didn't get these aren't special images in any way. I just did a quick Google search and just downloaded whichever ones I thought would look good on the site. So there's nothing special about these images. Now here's the coffee shop project folder. So you may recall that images is a static asset, and static assets are stored in the public directory. So we open that up, open up the images folder, and let's take the barista and just drop it off right here. And now we have barista JPEG right here. Let's go back over here and change that to barista JPEG, and then reload the site. And there we go. Looks good. So just like the other contents, we want to fetch this from the page configuration file. So we want to go to the home JSON, and we want to do another key called bg image, and then that's going to be the image path. So images barista.jpg, and then we want to then change this to page.hero.bg_image and render it that way instead. So when I reload, everything looks the same. So we're good to go. Now, what we want to do next is make sure that this works on the staging environment as well. So just like the global configuration file from before, we have to synchronize our context from our local environment to the remote staging server. So it's the same process. We do turbo, page, and then the name of the page. That would be home. And this basically syncs up the context in the remote environment with the contents we have locally. So now we can do a turbo deploy, and God willing, if everything works, this should look the same. So let's cross our fingers. So I am going to pause the video while it deploys. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's take a look at what we got on the staging server. There we go. So now everything looks the same on staging as it does on local, and it is rendering the contents from the home JSON. And just like the global JSON, if we want to make a change to any of this content, we can just change the home configuration file rather than the actual HTML and redeploying everything. So for example, let's say we want to get rid of this exclamation mark. Very simple. All we do is we go to the home.json and we get rid of it. Just remove it. And then we do turbo page home. Just update the context on the remote. And that should be all set to go. And so now it's gone, and this is coming from the staging server, so everything is all synced up. So that's great. So now let's move on to the next section down here. Let's call this the About section, and let's replace all this with contents for Joe's Coffee House. So we have another background image, header, subtext. We'll leave that as about, and a couple sub images right here. So let's take care of all that. So over here in the home JSON, we now have another section called About, which also has a header text, a sub text, also a background image, so we have our header text, subtext, background image, and let's call these, this is going to be an array of images. and then we'll populate this later. So let's go ahead and fill this out. So we have our header text. I guess we'll say welcome to Joe's Coffee. Coffee shop. Or Joe's Coffee House, excuse me. And for now, in the subtext, I'm just going to use the same as the description from the global, just to save some time. But really, it should be something unique to this. And then the background image for this, I have Barista 2, which is going to be this one right here. So let's go ahead and just slide that over. And we want to do /images, and then Barista 2. Okay, and let's populate these 3 to start, and let's make sure that that's showing up properly. So we have in the About section, we have page, and then the About section, and then the header text. And then down here we have page, and then the About section, and then subtext. And then for the image, that would be over here. And then we have page, about, and then BG image. And let's take a look at that and see how that looks on the local environment. Cool. Okay. So now we have that, and then let's start filling out this section right here. So we have 3 images here, and they each have their own caption. So let's see. Let's call this special recipe. Let's call it our specialties. Okay, and then we have 3 images. Each one is right here. So you can see them right here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so each one of these has an image URL as well as a caption. So let's go ahead and fill out those in the home JSON. That's going to be 3 objects with a URL. Or no, let's just go with image. And caption. And don't forget the comma, because this is an array, and we want 3 of these. And so now we have 3 images and captions, and those images are going to be right here. Coffee, cupcake, and tea. So we have coffee, cup of coffee, tea, and cupcake. So let's drop these guys into the images folder, and we have coffee, tea, and cupcake, all JPEG files. So images, coffee.jpg, tea, and cupcake. And let's hold off on the caption for now, and let's render these in the home mustache. So the way you loop through an array is I'm going to remove the other 2 images, and in the mustache templating engine, the way you loop through an array is you grab the key, so it's page.about.images, so that's right here, page.about.images, and you put a hashtag in front of it, and then you wrap it around the content you want to loop, and then you put a slash at the end of it. So basically what this is saying is that Mustache will render this content for every item inside the images array. And then each item in the array will be passed into this content like it's its own little rendering engine. So we can then get rid of this and replace it with image. That is this key right here. So hopefully that makes sense. And right now we're going to leave the caption alone. So let's see how that looks over here. Coffee, tea, cupcake. And so let's go ahead and focus on the captions now. So we're going to do caption right here, and then inside the home.json, let's go back here and just put in captions, pastries for the cupcake one. Okay, and let's see how that looks. Coffee, tea, pastries. All right, so now we have our content fully fleshed out for this section right here. Don't forget to update the home context on the remote. So you turn off the server and we do turbo page home, and this will update the context on the remote server with the new updates you made over here. So we just added all this JSON to the remote context, and so now if we deploy again, we should see the same thing. So let's go ahead and do that. And just like before, I'm going to pause the video while this goes up. Okay, the deployment is now up, so let's hit the remote endpoint and let's confirm that everything looks the same over there. So the header looks good and the about section looks good. So let's say we want to add a little bit more content here. All we got to do is go to the home JSON, and I'm just going to copy and paste it because I don't really have anything prepared for this part. I'm just going to copy and paste it a couple times, and then all we need to do is turbo page home, and that will update the remote context without having to redeploy or anything like that. And that makes that a lot easier, a lot quicker, just to make small changes like that. You know, it makes that process a lot less painful than opening up all the source code again and redeploying and all that stuff. So, okay, great. Let's make a few more tweaks. I'm just going to get rid of this. You don't have to if you don't want to, but this section right here I'm not a big fan of, so I'm just going to get rid of that. So that would be this section right here. So this section right here I am going to just get rid of. Oh, that's the remote. We want to test it on local. Okay, and we're going to go with this just because. All right, so the main takeaway here is to understand how to update your content between the global content, which is the nav and the footer, and the page-specific content. So we have pretty easy and clear mechanisms to do that in this project and on the Turbo environment in general. And so when you're making these kinds of cosmetic changes on your site, the important thing is to understand which area you should be focusing on, the page JSON or the global. So for example, we have all these hours down here and the social media icons, which we did not change at all. Since you know, this is in the footer, this content really belongs in the global JSON, all right, because it's not really specific to the home page, same as these icons over here. So these icons, social media icons, belong in the global JSON configuration file because these will show up on all the pages. So we want the main thing is understanding how to draw that distinction. I'm going to make one quick change on this. I'm going to change this to Monday through Friday is 9, well, it should be 9 to 12, I guess, and then Saturday and Sunday. So let's go ahead and do that, this time in the global JSON. So we have global, let's see, this is going to be hours. Let's just call that hours. And this is going to be an array because it's going to have one for each row, right? And each object will have days, day, we'll just call it day, and then time. So then we're going to have one row for Monday through Friday, another one for Saturday and Sunday. So let's go with that. So Monday through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And let's say Monday through Friday, it's 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 a.m. to, I don't know, 9 p.m. Okay. So now we have a global section for hours, and then if we go to the footer now, rather than having all of these show up as individual rows, we can get rid of all of these except for one. I'm going to leave one behind, and then we do global.hours, and don't forget we're looping through an array, so that should be a hashtag, and then we want to close it, and then this will show up for every element of the array. And you may recall each element has a day key and an hours key, I believe. Time key, excuse me, time. And so this should now render according to the values we just did. And there we go. So now what we can do is, don't forget to update the remote context. So turbo page global. And then do another quick deploy just to make sure everything works. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's take a look at the remote. Looks good, looks good. And the footer now has our updated hours. And let's say Joe says, hey, I want to stay open later on Sundays because people want to come in late on Sundays. Same thing. So let's say we want to do an extra hour on Sundays. We just change the configuration and then turbo page global and then reload, and there is the change. Great. So we did not work on the social media icons. I recommend that you try that on your own, give that a shot based on the way we've been working with this so far. And a couple things on the home page. Maybe you want to make this configurable, the about, as well as our specialties. We did not do that in this video, so I encourage you to give that a shot on your own, applying the concepts we worked on throughout the video itself. Make sure you understand which file you need to be updating when. So the social media stuff should go in the global, and then the home, and then if you're feeling ambitious, try heading over to the blog page and maybe changing some of these based on the configuration. Maybe you don't want it to say stories. Maybe you want to remove the header altogether. Who knows? Oh, by the way, notice how the footer shows the same content on the blog page as it does on the home page. And all the context has been properly formatted. Everything is showing up like it does on the home page. That's good. Let's head back to the home page. Oh, that's the error on the nav bar, right? Let's fix that right now. So on the nav header, we have our home href going to index. It should just be slash. That's the home page index. Okay, so let's change the home page. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is focus on the menu content down here. So this menu is going to consist of 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to remove this bottom column right here. So it's going to be coffee, tea, and pastries. So let's go ahead and make that change in the home mustache file. So we have a row over here which has breakfast and all of its contents. So that would be this div right here, and then lunch, and then dinner, and then desserts. So desserts is the beginning of the next row, so let's grab that and let's get rid of it. And then wine card, which is this one right here, same deal, let's get rid of that. And then drinks down here. Okay, and let's get rid of that. Okay, And then let's go ahead and run the local server, and let's make sure that that second row is properly removed. Oh, this is on the remote. We want to check the local. Okay. Great. So now we only have one row. And while we're on here, let's go ahead and check the blog page and then check the home page. Good. So the link was properly corrected. So that's good. Now, in the next video, we're going to actually populate this, but we're going to do it differently than we've been doing the content so far. We're not going to use the configuration JSON files because this data is a little bit different. This is much more dynamic data in that it changes a lot. It's more like the kind of data you would see in a blog post, or perhaps like profiles on a social media site, that kind of thing, where the changes are frequent, the data is much more dynamic. Your specials might change from day to day, and your prices may change, and things of that sort. So really what we want to do is use a content management system to host all this data, and so that we can add and remove and change items really easily and quickly, and have a robust way of maintaining all that. And that's going to be done through a database. So this is much more dynamic content, which we're going to have to focus on via a CMS or content management system, which Turbo also provides. So it's a simple integration of the Turbo CMS, and then we will render all that using the database queries and populating the results in the template using the results from the DB query, rather than just hard coding in the raw JSON. So in that sense, it's a little bit more like maintaining a blog, where you add new blog posts and make changes and upload images and all that stuff. And that's what we'll be doing to maintain this content in the next video. So so that's it. Hopefully you got everything working. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 3. Hey guys, welcome back to our coffee shop website tutorial series here on Turbo 360. In the previous video, we continued setting up the UI for the home page, specifically setting up this section over here, taking advantage of the Mustache templating engine as well as the page JSON configuration files. So hopefully you got this working as well. Today we're going to continue this process and fill out this menu section over here by populating these menu items with our own menu items from our coffee shop. So it's going to be coffee, tea, and pastries. And what we're going to do is use the built-in Turbo content management system to load this data, so that we can store this data essentially in a database in our Turbo CMS, and then render it over here rather than using the JSON files. So the content management system on Turbos is a pretty robust system that basically integrates with a Mongo-like database where we can store data essentially. And we are going to set that up right now and start populating our CMS, our database, with our menu items and have them showing up over here. So let's get started. So here I am in the root level of the project. I'm going to run the local server and make sure everything still works properly. Okay, here we are on localhost. Okay, everything looks good. Let's go back here, turn off the server, and start setting up the CMS. So the CMS on Turbo is built in, but you have to configure your project to use it. It's a very simple Turbo command. We simply do turbo extend, because we are now extending our project with the CMS. And what this is going to do is create a couple new directories and files in our root level of the project, which is basically going to set up the CMS configuration. So press enter and you'll see a few things pop up here. So we have models, controllers, and a TMP directory down here. So this is basically a database integration. We have to do one more thing to complete the integration. Head over to the app.js. And over here on line 21, we have to tell our configuration that we are using the database. And that's how you do that. So this basically establishes the database connections. That would happen over here. So now if we open up, take a look through those new directories. So let's start with models. You'll see that we have one file called post. If we open that up, you're going to see a schema. a model schema for effectively a blog post. So if you look at these attributes, you'll see that we have the attributes that you would normally find in a blog, like a WordPress blog. So we have title, image, text, author, stuff like that. Every one of these has its own set of options attached to it. Specifically, the type is the most important thing. So we have data types and things like string, numbers, objects, and arrays, and a couple configuration options on these attributes. This basically follows the Mongo and Mongoose ORM style of modeling your data. In fact, these are taken from the Mongoose APIs. So basically, by following this structure, we are essentially learning how to use Mongo and Mongoose. So this is a post schema that's already built in. If you open up the controllers directory, you'll see there's a controller file called post controller. And what this class does, this is a class, and what this class does is it handles what's called the Crud operations. So the fetches, the create calls. So we have a get instance method which performs the fetches. We have a get by ID which performs a fetch by unique identifier. Post, which is for creation. Put, which is update, and delete, which of course is delete. So basically, this controller is essentially a proxy to all the CRUD operations on a model, or what's sometimes referred to as a resource. In this case, they're going to be more or less the same thing. These models can be called resources as well. So the controllers is where we do most of the interfacing with our querying in our writing to the database. So that's how this is set up. Of course, we're not setting up a blog right now, at least. We're setting up a menu. So we need to create our own resource and controller to handle the writes and the reads from the database. So we do that by running a command called turbo resource, because we're creating a new resource, and we're going to call the resource item, and this is going to be a menu item. So what this is going to do is create the model and the controller for us on our behalf. So we have a item in the models directory and a item controller in the controllers directory. If we open up the model item or the item model, it's basically just an empty schema with two built-in options, a timestamp and the schema name. So what we can do is use this to set up our own item schema for the menu item, which if we slide over to the home page, you'll see consists of a name, description, an image, and a price. So those four, but we need one more for the category. So that's going to be a fifth one, the category. So let's go ahead and set those up. So we're going to have an image. The default value is going to be an empty string, and we do not want the immutable flag here because that means it cannot be changed. We're going to want a name, a category, a description, and a price. Now the price is the only one whose type is not going to be a string. This is going to be a number. So we should set the default as a number to 0. And this is going to establish our schema for our item in the database. I'm going to add one flag to the name attribute called display. We're going to set that as true, and I'll explain what that does in a few moments. So now if we head over to the item controller, you'll see it's basically the same as the post controller. The only difference is it's running CRUD operations against the item model. But the actual instance methods are the same. So we have a get by ID, post for creation, put, and delete. And this is how we basically are going to interface with our items in our database throughout our code. There's one more thing we need to do, is we need to head over to the controller's index, and we need to essentially register this new controller. So we need to do item controller, and then we need to export the item controller like so. And this basically exports the controller for usage throughout the rest of the project. So without doing this, our project essentially won't know about it. Okay, so this basically sets everything up. Let's go ahead and run this server locally and make sure nothing is broken. Okay, let's head over to localhost. Okay, everything looks good. We didn't make any visual changes, so everything's going to look the same here. But what we want to do now is figure out how to actually interface with the database. How do we add items to the backend? And the Turbo CMS gives us a very handy visual tool where we can do that, where we can just go ahead and start inserting records into our database. So in order to use that visual tool, we have to deploy the project so that our remote site is aware that we are using the CMS, and then we can go ahead and use the CMS to add records. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and run a deploy. And while that's going up, I'm going to pause the video as usual. Okay, the deployment is now up. Let's head over to staging and make sure everything still works properly on the staging URL. Okay, looking good. So like I said, we didn't make any visual changes. So the question is, where do we actually interact with the CMS? So if you head over to your Turbo account and click on your account page, and then on the left side, click on My Sites and click on Sites and select your project. So for me, it's called Coffee Shop over here. And on the left side, you'll see there's a configuration menu option. Click on that, and you'll see there's a CMS link here, which is showing up now. Don't worry about all this, by the way. I'll show you how to make this look nicer in another video. You'll see there's a CMS link now, which is showing up because we have added the CMS to our project. So if you click on that, you'll see we have basically a table where we can add and update records in our CMS. And on the upper right corner here is where the resources are listed. So if I drop this down, you'll see that we have post and item, which corresponds with the two resources in our controller's index. So post and item. If I click on item, you'll see we have a table, an empty table, where we can add items and remove and update and things like that. And if you're wondering, if you go back to the item schema, this name attribute, the display flag, which is set to true, is what makes it show up here. So that's why that's showing up. So we can use this to start adding items to our CMS for our menu. So that's going to be our coffee and tea and pastries. I have prepared a few images in advance of this video for that purpose. We'll have a bunch of images of coffee and cupcakes and tea and things like that. This directory of images is going to be linked to the description of this video. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just take a look at the description and there will be a download link for this. If you're watching this on the Turbo website directly, do the same thing. Just head over to the description section of this particular video, so video 3, and there'll be a link to this download as well. There's nothing special about these images. You can go ahead and download your own. I just grabbed these off Google, so I just found a bunch on Google and I just grabbed these. So either way is fine by me. So here we're going to add our first item. So we're just going to call it coffee. The category is going to be coffee. Our standard black coffee. And the price is going to be $1. And let's go ahead and add an image. So just click on this right here. It says image. And that's going to be coffee, black coffee. Okay, and that's going to upload the image and create the coffee. Now we need to actually create the item. So we go ahead and press create, and then the item is created. And you'll notice that it assigns a unique identifier automatically, and then the item itself now shows up in the table. So we can click on this later on if we want to make changes, if you want to change the price or the image or anything like that. So let's go ahead and add another item. This time it's going to be tea. Let's call it hot tea. The category is going to be tea. Our homemade hot tea. This will also be $1. Let's go ahead and change the image to tea. And then same thing, we create the item. And now we have two items or two records in our CMS, one for each category. And let's do the third and final one for pastry. So we'll go with cookies on this. Chocolate cookies is fine. Chocolate cookies. the category is pastries, our home baked chocolate chip cookie. I'm going to make this one $2, and let's change the image to cookies and create the item. And we are all set now with our 3 items, 1 for each category. So we have 1 item in each category, coffee, tea, and pastries, and currently sitting in our CMS. So that's ready to go. The question becomes now, how do we actually get this in our local project? So our local project is not aware of these items. The records in the database, and the records in the database in our local project are stored in this TMP directory. So you'll see we have an items and a posts DB, but they're both empty because we only created these on the remote server on the staging environment. So what you want to do to sync up, we can sync up our local project with our remote CMS very simply. First thing we want to do is create an endpoint. So head over to your routes main file, and I'm going to create another endpoint called items. And what this endpoint is going to do is it's going to fetch the items from our CMS and then render them as raw JSON. So in order to do that, we need to grab the controllers, because remember, the controllers are what handles all the CRUD operations. So we're grabbing the controllers, which is really just this index file right here, which has these two resources exported. We want to grab the item controller. So that's this right here. It's important to remember that these controllers are classes. So we need to create an instance of the item controller. So we just call an instance method like that. And this will give us an instance of the item controller, which gives us access to these CRUD operation calls. So we can call get by ID, post, put, and delete. We can add more to this, by the way. You can add as many as you want to this controller if you want to have some sort of custom query call or some sort of different kind of creation call. But at a bare minimum, these should be implemented, these 5. But if you want to add more to these, that's perfectly fine. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. So now we want to run a query, and that's going to be a get call, item controller get. Now this is an asynchronous method, so we should really run this as an async await function like that. And then what we want to do is return these items as a raw JSON array like so. Now if I run the server locally and hit this endpoint, let's go to localhost 3000 and then hit the endpoint, so that's /items. You're going to see an empty array because we don't have any items in our local database. It's very important to understand, but we do have items in our remote staging environment. So right now they're out of sync. They're not synced up. So let's turn off the server and sync it up. So we need to get rid of these temp files. You can do that manually if you want, or you can also do npm run reset, and this will reset the temp data directory. It'll just basically clear out the temp files. And then we can run npm run serve again. And this time, when we run this query, because the DB files are gone, it will resync from the remote environment. So what we can do now is hit the endpoint, and we are now seeing the items from our endpoint, our CMS on the remote staging environment. This is what we just loaded in this admin dashboard right here. So this should line up with what we added a few minutes ago, and now we have access to this data in our local project. So let's head back to here, turn off the server. So what we want to do then is we want to, actually I'm going to do one more thing here. Right now we're fetching all the items, but really what we're going to want to do is fetch items according to their categories. That could be pastries, coffee, or tea, right? So what we can do is we can grab a filters object from the URL request parameters. That's going to be query parameters. This is just a JSON object, and we can just pass this in. And so what that means is when I run the query one more time, here I'm just getting all of them because there are no filters, so that means we just grab all the items. But let's say I only want the category of pastries, so I can do question mark category and then pastries like that, and this should apply the filter. So now we only are getting pastries from our CMS, and then we can also do the same for coffee. This is our coffee items, and then our tea items, and then if we just put in an invalid one, we get an empty array. So now we can make queries for our menu items according to category. That makes life a little bit easier as far as organizing our data. So let's go ahead and apply this to our home page request. So basically what we want to do is head back to our home page. I'm going to create a data variable, which is going to be the context, excuse me. I'm going to pass in the data variable in here like that. And then what we want to do now is basically run the same queries on the home page. So we want to grab the item controller, and then we want to fetch the items. Now this is another async await situation, so don't forget the async await flag right there. And then what we want to do next is we want to fetch each item according to category. And let's say coffee for the first one. And then what we want to do is append that to the data object before it goes into the render command. So we're going to want to do that for each category, of course. So coffee, tea, and pastries. And so now the data object that's being passed to the home mustache template now has an array for each category in the menu. So if I run the home page request, and head over to the home page, now we're not going to see anything different because we only queried the data, but we didn't do anything with it. So the data is there, we're just not rendering it. So we need to update this section now with our menu items. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's open up our views and then our home template, and then scroll down to that menu item section, which is right here. We want to change this breakfast category to coffee. And if you look closely, we have these three sections or divs, which each one represents a menu item. So we have these three right here. I'm going to remove the bottom two and use this one over here that's left behind as sort of our template for each menu item right here. So now if you recall in the main route, that is data.coffee. That's an array of coffee items. So to loop through an array in mustache, we do double curly brace hashtag coffee. We don't need the data key because it's the data key is the main object. And then don't forget the closing loop right here. And then what that means is this div will render for every item in the coffee array. So if I expand this, we can now populate the HTML with the keys from the menu item itself. So we have image, we have name, we have price, and we also have a description down here on the bottom. Description. And these are from the actual schema of the item itself. So now we are using the schema to render the data on the template. So if I run the serve now, hopefully when I reload, I will see our coffee item show up right here. And there it is. So we have the coffee category, our coffee item, price, description, and the image. So now we can apply that same logic to the other two categories, which are tea and pastries. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to grab this right here, and instead of lunch, we're going to replace that with tea. And here are the the examples in the template that came out of the box. Let's get rid of all those and replace it with our loop. So I just pasted that in, and this time we're looping through the T array in the data object. And I'm going to go ahead and just finish that with pastries right away. Pastries. And then we have our 3 built-in menu items right here. 1, 2, 3. Let's get rid of these. And let's replace it with our pastries array instead. And so now if I run the serve, we should see our coffee, our tea, and our pastries show up right here. Coffee, tea, pastries. And that's coming from the CMS loaded locally and then being rendered by virtue of these right here. So to finish this off, let's do a deploy and make sure it works on the staging environment as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run the deploy and then pause the video. Okay, the deploy is up, so we can hit the endpoint now, and this time we should see a visual change. So let's go ahead and double check that. Coffee, tea, and pastries. And now this is on the live environment rather than the local host, so we are confident that it works on the remote as well as on local. And so this is how we connected to CMS. If you downloaded the images from the description of this video, you'll see that we have several more. I downloaded 3 for each category. So I encourage you to go back and fill out the rest of this menu. Just go back here and fill out some more menu items and sort of flush it out a little bit more, add some more just menu options essentially. And this dashboard right here makes it a lot easier for really us as developers and anyone you're working with too. So if you're doing this for a client, maybe someone you know actually does have a coffee shop, there's no reason why that client couldn't go in here and make changes to the price or the image or the description and things like that, and that will update the CMS as well. So that's something that that'll make life a lot easier for collaboration if that's what you plan on doing as a developer. So I'm going to wrap it up here. This is a quick intro to the Turbo CMS. Another thing that you should consider trying out on your own for more enrichment is to fill out this part, these sections from the template JSON files. So you may have noticed that we hard-coded these into the raw HTML, which kind of defeats the purpose. Really what you want to do is have all this data inside of the home JSON somehow, and so that everything is rendering from these JSON files. So that really the reason you want to do that is so that you can reuse this template for as many coffee shops as you want without making a million changes. All you're doing is changing the configuration files. So that's another thing that I encourage you to try on your own as a matter of enrichment. Try to reapply a lot of the concepts we went through in videos 1, 2, and 3 to sort of flush this out a little bit more and make it a little bit more robust for your future use. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you got everything working, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back to the coffee shop website tutorial here on Turbo 360. In the previous video, we set up the content management system on Turbo so that we can have a place to store our menu items. I added this iced tea one here in between videos, so if you don't have this, that's because I just did this right before this video. So, and hopefully you got all that working. So now we have a usable, simple to use and integrate content management system / database where we can add records and store data for the project. So we're going to continue using that. We're going to skip ahead a little bit and skip this section. We will come back to this in a later video. And scroll down to the bottom right here where it says book a table and make a reservation. We're going to change this to place an order. So this will basically be filled out by the user, and then when the user clicks a button, it will create an order that will go to our CMS where we can track orders, and then we can theoretically fulfill them as the owner of the coffee shop. So let's go ahead and set that up. So I'm going to run the local host and just make sure everything still works on local. Okay, looking good. So let's go ahead and start filling this out. So the first thing we're going to do is head over to our home template and scroll to the bottom where it says make a reservation. I'm going to collapse these sections so it's easier to navigate. Okay, make a reservation, and then what we're going to do is take the name and the email, remove these, and we're going to replace it with just a text area saying what would you like to order. So we have a name and an email. That's the first two columns, name and email, and we're going to take these out and replace it with the text area. These are column 6 bootstrap classes. So what the 6 means is that means it's taking up only half the occupied space. So these other col 6s, 1, 2, 3, oh, and 4, this one right here, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are these 4 right here, phone, date, time, and person. So we're going to remove these 3, so make sure you have that removed. And then we're going to change this to a column 12. So that means these 3 will disappear, and this one right here will go all the way across. So let's go ahead and run the server and make sure that that looks accurate. Name, email, phone, and then it goes all the way across. Now, we don't actually want it to be the phone, we want it to be order. And then we want to change this to a text area, which is basically a text box. And text area. And then the placeholder will be describe your order here. Okay, and let's see how that looks. Okay, let's make this a little bit taller. So let's add a style attribute. Actually, this is going to be a number of rows, so we want to make it 8 rows taller. And then let's do a style attribute. Give it a different background color. One, two, three, four, five, six. Maybe it's background color. Okay, I'm not sure why this background isn't applying. It's probably one of these. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so there's a CSS class that's overriding these style attributes. Let's go back to doing it like that. Okay, that's what I was going for in the first place. All right, so apologies for that minor delay. Let's go ahead and fill this out now. Fill out the attributes. So for the name input, we're going to want to give it an attribute called name, which is also called name. And then for the email, we want to give it a name attribute and call this one email. And for the text area, we want to give it a name attribute called order. And when we reload, nothing's going to change visually, but now these attributes are filled out. So what we need to do now is take the form which will send the data to our server as a post request. So we're going to send the form to an endpoint called order, and we need to set the method as post. So what we're saying here is that we want the form to send the data to an endpoint called /order as a post request. Now, this endpoint doesn't exist yet. We did not set it up. So let's head over to our main.js route and create a new handler. But this time it's a post, and it's going to be /order. And this will be sort of the receiver of that data. So this will be what receives the data. So for now, we're just going to grab the order data from the request body, and we are just going to we're going to send it right back. Actually, you should send it back as JSON. So all we're doing is we're bouncing it right back. So let's go ahead and test that out. Okay, so let's see what we get here. So we joe@gmail.com, and then large coffee, press make a reservation, and here we have the endpoint with the name, the email, and the order. So the data has been successfully sent to the server. So that's good to go. So now what we want to do is store this data also within our CMS. So we want to create a new resource for this data called order. Basically, these are going to be the attributes of the schema, and we want to then store that in the CMS as a new record whenever this form is submitted. Place your order is really the better name for this button. Place your order. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's turn off the server, and if you recall, we're creating a resource, and that's the command for that is turbo resource, and then the name of the class. So we're going to call this order, and that will create the item. I'm sorry, the model and the schema on our behalf. So we have order right here and the controller right here. So that's done for us on our behalf. So let's create, let's see what we have here. We have name, email, and order. So name, and this is the name of the person who is placing the order. The default will be empty string. Email, also empty string, and then the order itself. And we're going to set the name as the display so that this shows up in the table in the CMS. And this should be good to go. So now when the order comes in here, we want to grab the order controller. So let's grab the order controller. Oh, before I do that, don't forget we have to export the controller. Very easy to forget. So order controller. Should always name it after the resource itself. And then now we can grab the order controller back in our main.js. That's going to be in the controllers. It's going to be in order, and don't forget we have to create an instance of it. And then the order controller, this time we want to create a new order. So if you look at the actual controller itself, that happens in the post call. So we want to call it post on the controller this time, which will create the order. So we do post, and then we pass in the data right here. Now this is another async call, so we want to do async await here. And this will return the created order. So this time I want to just return that instead, and that should create the order in the CMS for the user, the visitor who placed the order. So it'll be stored in our backend. So let's go ahead and run that, and then head over to the home page again, and let's try it out. joe@gmail.com. I would like a large coffee. please. Okay, let's see what happens. And here it is. Now this time it looks a little bit different. You see we have an ID. We still have the main attributes, and we have a timestamp. So that's because this is coming from the actual CMS on our local host. So if you head back to our code and turn off the server, if you look at the temp directory, we now have another file called orders.db, and this was inserted into our DB. So that means it's working locally. But bear in mind, we did not deploy, right? So our remote hosting environment is not aware of this. So we can't do this yet on the staging server, but that's simple. We just have to deploy. So turn off the server and throw this up on the staging environment. I'm going to pause the video. So okay, the deployment is up. Let's take a look at the staging server. And everything looks good here. And now we have our order form down here with the updated UI from our changes. If we head over to our CMS, so head over to your account and then click on My Sites. Here's the coffee shop. Click on Configuration and then take a look at the CMS. Here we still have our posts showing up, but if you click on Select Data Type, we now have a third item called option called order, and this is where the orders will end up. And again, you see that the name shows up over here because that is the attribute with the display flag assigned over here. So this is now showing up properly on the staging environment as well. Let's place an order on the staging environment. So let's go with iced tea, please. And then place your order, and here is the same output that we saw on localhost showing the ID and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and reload the CMS and see if that shows up on our backend order. And here it is. Mike was created just now. If I click on this, you can see what the order is, and this is a record of the order that we just created. So this is where you as the coffee admin or perhaps the person you're creating the site for can see where the orders come in. Let's make a few cosmetic changes here. The idea is we don't want the user to see this on the confirmation, right? That's not really a good user experience. What we want to do is when the order comes in, we want this button to go away, and it should just say, thanks, we have received your order. We'll email you when it's ready, something like that. So let's go ahead and set that up just to make this more cosmetically appealing, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the place your order button and I'm going to give it an ID called button order, right? And then what we're going to do is on the front end, we're going to create, we're going to have a click handler for this button, which will submit the order for us. So let's go ahead and set that up. Now, if you take a look at the scripts, basically the question I'm wondering right now is whether or not jQuery is included in this, which it is. jQuery is included in part of this theme, so we're going to use jQuery to do this. So we're going to create a script. And we're gonna create a client-side script, and we're gonna have it wrap a self-closing function like that. And then what we want to do for now is just do a console log hello, just to see if this shows up on the browser side when the page loads. So let's go ahead and confirm that first. So let's head back to localhost and open the console. That's Option Command I if you are on Chrome, and this is the hello output that we just tested. So that means we are successfully running the script on the client side. What we want to do now is grab this button order form using jQuery. So I'm going to just grab this using jQuery. And add a click handler, and that's going to take an event, and we want to prevent it. So We want to do prevent default. In other words, we're telling it to not submit the form. We want to actually prevent that from happening. And then console log place order. So let's see if that works. So now if I reload, scroll to the bottom, and we can just click this and see what happens. See right here, place order. And notice how the form itself didn't submit. Nothing happened on the client side. So now we're just seeing this show up. We're basically intercepting the form, and then we're going to send it using jQuery/Ajax instead. And then that way, when the response comes back, if it's a successful confirmation, we can just remove this button using some client-side UI changes, and it'll just say thanks and so forth and so on. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we want to do next is we want to take ID attributes, add ID attributes to each one of the inputs. So order description, we'll say order email for this one, and then we'll say order name. And so what we can do now is grab those attributes when the user clicks this button right here. So we're just grabbing those on the client side. So let's create a variable called order, and that's going to have a name, an email, and I believe we called it order. Yeah, the actual order. Okay, so these will be grabbed from the input fields themselves. So order, name, and then that's going to be val. So we're just grabbing the values from the input fields. So order email, make sure you spell it right, otherwise it'll mess up on the server. And then order description. And so then what we can do now is we can just console log the order by doing a JSON stringify. And then this way we can confirm whether or not the order it looks good data-wise, is accurate in terms of data. Let's go ahead and confirm that. So let's go back here, open the console, Option Command I, and reload. Steve at gmail.com, and let's say cookies. So here we have the JSON. So we have the name is Steve, the email is steve@gmail.com, order is cookies, everything looks accurate. So now we can send this to our server instead, rather than using the form itself. So we can place an Ajax. We can place an Ajax call here. It's a .ajax, and then that takes a URL, and that's going to be our endpoint. So order method is post, data is the order itself, and success. And error. Now I believe this is how you set up an Ajax call. I haven't done this in a while, so I'm just going to confirm it. Order received. And let's stringify the response. That's this guy right here. And what I'm going to do is go back to my main.js, and I'm going to bypass all this for now. And we're going to just do res.json and then the order data, because this might, I may have made a mistake. It's very possible. It happens all the time. So what we want to do is make sure that this is properly set up first before we enter anything into the database. That's really what we're doing here. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm just going to restart the server. And then let's go ahead and test it out. Joe@gmail.com. And there it is. And so everything went through successfully. So now this is how we can update the UI of the page rather than redirecting to that raw JSON string we did earlier so that the user isn't confused by it. So really what we want to do now is we want to, on the order received confirmation, we want to grab the input button order. Actually, let's do ID here, the container, button order container. We want to grab that guy and set the HTML to, and let's do a header 3 tag. Thanks. We will send you an email when your order is ready. And let's see how that looks. So let's go ahead and try that. It's got to run the server. And let's reload that guy. And Jane at gmail.com. And let's, I don't know, Jane wants a latte. Okay. Let's see, let's clear this out, and then thanks. We will send you an email when your order is ready. So this is a more elegant user experience. This is really how it should be. So now what we want to do is go back, turn off the server, and then go back to the main.js. And this time we want to reinsert the data into our CMS. Because otherwise we're not tracking the order anywhere. If you take a look at the orders DB, you'll see there's only still that one, right? So that's no good. We're not storing it anywhere. And let's test it one more time locally, and let's see if it works. LeBron at gmail.com, large iced coffee. Thanks. We will send you an email when your order is ready. And now, if you look at the orders DB file in the temp, we now have 2 orders, Joe and LeBron. So now it is persisting to our CMS. So now let's go ahead and send this up to the staging environment and test it up there. All right, the deployment is up. Let's head over to staging. And let's try Michael Jordan at gmail.com. I would like cupcakes. Okay, place an order. Thanks. We will send you an email when your order is ready. So now let's head over to our Turbo CMS. We're already here. I'm just going to reload this and then check the CMS. And now we have 2 orders, Mike from the first time and Mike, well, I shouldn't have went with Michael, but here's the second one. I would like cupcakes. So now this is all set to go. It is now persisting the orders to our CMS successfully. So, and this is a better UI for on the front end for the user. And so this is all set to go. So from a functional standpoint, our coffee shop website is coming along pretty well. It's doing most of what we want it to do. A good idea, a good exercise, maybe in another tutorial, I'll do this later on, is when this order is submitted, it should send an email to the proprietor of the coffee shop. So the owner of the shop doesn't have to check the CMS all the time. He'll just get an email. And perhaps I'll show you how to do that in a follow-up tutorial. But to finish this out in the next video, what I'm going to do is finish out this UI section right here, as well as down here, and that should really complete this coffee shop sort of front end. And yeah, that's it. So hopefully you got everything working. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back to our coffee shop website tutorial here on Turbo 360. In the previous video, we set up the order form connection so that when the user places an order, it actually creates a new order record in our CMS, and the owner of the shop can then check that to see if any orders have come in. So in this video, we're going to do some optimizations. We're going to, and most importantly, we're going to connect the image and CSS and JavaScript assets to the built-in content delivery network, or the CDN, that comes with every Turbo project. So what's a CDN? A content delivery network is basically the best way to manage your static assets on a website. What it does is it places your static assets in a series of locations. It's called what's called the edge network, which is a series of servers that are strategically placed closest to wherever the visitor is geographically located. So what that means is, let's say, for example, somebody is visiting your website from California, then the static assets should be delivered from a server closest to that person in the West Coast, as opposed to someone maybe visiting your website from Europe. So if a person is visiting your website from Europe, then the static assets are delivered from a server probably in Europe, and that's the edge network, and that's done through a CDN, or a content delivery network. Normally you'd have to set up the CDN yourself and get all that connected properly to your static assets, but one of the key features of Turbo is that it does that for you out of the box. But just like the CMS, you have to integrate it. It's not something that just works automatically. So to show you kind of how it works, if we go to our staging server for the project, which is right here, let's say we click on one of these images. So this one right here. Let's go with this one right here, the first one we uploaded. So we want to click on this. So open in new tab. Now you'll notice that the URL here is not our website, it's the CDN. So in other words, the images are redirected to the CDN anyway. However, the image URL here is coming directly from our website. So ultimately the image redirects to the CDN anyway. However, it goes through our main server and then redirects to the CDN, which is really not the best way of looking at it. The way what that means is, for every one of these static asset requests, this is another example. CSS does the same thing. You see how it redirects to the CDN and away from our base URL. So the main point here is that it still goes through our server first and then redirects to the CDN, when in reality it should just go right to the CDN. It should just bypass our server entirely and hit the CDN directly. And that's the best way to handle these static assets. That's sort of the best optimization. That's sort of a professional way of handling it. So this CDN URL right here should actually be fully showing up over here. So in order to do that, it's actually pretty simple. It's provided to us in the context, the request context. So if we open up the main route right here, you see how we're grabbing the context on pretty much every request. Well, part of that context, in addition to the global configuration pages and things like that, is also the CDN, and it's just simply provided to us as a key called CDN. So what we can do is we can go into our head tag and simply add a slash and then a CDN like this, like that, except spell it right. So what this means is that the CDN will be provided linked to these static asset imports rather than just going directly to our server. So we can do that for all of these. Okay, and let's make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, and you might be wondering why I'm using 3 curly braces here instead of 2. Whenever you have whenever you're using the mustache templating for a full URL, I find that it's better to use 3 for what's called URL escaping. It's not really relevant to this tutorial, but it'll work with 2 if you just do it like this, but it's better if you just do 3. So that's really the main point there. So now if I run the server locally, and then head over to localhost, it's going to look the same, and if I go to the source code, it's still going to look the same. Nothing's going to be different because we're loading this from localhost, so there is no CDN on localhost. However, when I deploy to the server, the CDN will be provided to us by the context, and then this will then show up directly as the CDN URL. So I'm going to deploy this to the server and pause the video while it's going up. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's check it out on staging. Everything should look the same. Looks good. Now let's head over to the source code, and you'll see over here the full CDN paths are now showing up on the CSS imports. This is a much better way to handle your static assets because it bypasses your server entirely and it goes right to the static asset. And this content here is being served from the edge network, the edge location. So it's coming from a server that's most closest to me physically, geographically. And if I was based in Europe, then this would be coming from a different server in Europe somewhere instead. So this process should be applied to all the static assets. So really what we need to do is if we head down to the JavaScripts, you'll see that we're still rendering this directly from the server. And this is really no good. What we need to do is render this from the CDN as well. So let's head back to our scripts partial and do the same process. I'm going to just do a copy and replace here. So let's replace that with CDN, and you can just do this in one click like that. Save a little bit of time. That takes care of our JavaScript imports. Let's head over to our nav partial and look for any images. So the images want to be handled the same way. Inside the nav partial, I don't see any images, so we're okay there. Let's try the footer. Okay, no images here. And if we head over to the home mustache, okay, let's see here. Now we do have images coming from the templating engine, the template files, the configuration files, excuse me. So let's consider how we want to handle this. So if we look at the home JSON, this really should come from the CDN. Now this here will not work because this is a JSON file. So the templating engine doesn't pick this part up. So let's see, there's a couple ways we can handle this. Okay, so if we go to the home mustache, the best way to handle this is to place the CDN right here. So 1, 2, 3, CDN 1, 2, 3. And then that will place the CDN before the path right there. That's probably the best way to handle this. So let's do that. So we have a background image there, another one here. Another one here. One right here. Let's do a search for background image. So we got another one right here. right there. And here's one where the image is still from the actual template itself, the theme itself. Okay, and that covered all of them. Let's run it on localhost real quick, just to make sure it still works fine on localhost. Okay, no problems there. And then let's throw this back up on the staging server to make sure the CDN is also being used on the images as well. So I'm going to throw this up on staging. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's head over to staging and make sure everything looks the same. So there should be no visual differences here, but the images are now loading from the CDN, which is much faster. I'm not really sure why these icons aren't loading. Oh, it's because I replaced them in here as well. So I made a mistake on the actual menu section. So let's fix that real quick because that doesn't look good. So if I go to the menu section, we do not need the CDN for each menu item because those are loading from when we uploaded these images to the CMS. Those are loading from the CMS rather than the actual web source files. It's a bit of a difference. So we really should take care of that. But everything else so far is loading properly. Everything looks good at least. Let's go ahead and check the source code. We can just do that this way. So here we're getting all the CDN references, same as over here. If we check one of the images, we have that right here. This is the main hero image, and it's directly loading from the CDN. Now I'm going to do one more deploy just to fix these menu icons because we don't want to leave that broken. So inside the coffee and tea, we got to get rid of that. And pastries sections. This should now be rendering from the CMS. So I'm going to deploy this, but this time I'm not going to pause the video because while it's deploying I'm going to explain the mistake that I made. So these images for the menu items are actually stored in the CMS rather than the source code of the video. I'm sorry, the project, excuse me. Whereas the other images are stored in the actual source code, meaning they're in the public/images folder. And so these images are coming from the source code, whereas the menu items are coming from the CMS. Those are two different locations. So the CMS did not need to be connected to the CDN because they're already in the CDN. The CMS does that for you. So we were actually doing it twice, which is too much. That's why the links were broken. So we had to go ahead and correct that so that the menu icons properly show up. So once the staging is up, we will confirm that, and that should be it for this video. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's head back to staging and make sure we didn't leave something in a broken state. There we are, back in business over here, and everything is now looking good and loading from the CDN for the static assets. This is considered a very important optimization too. So this makes your website faster. Everything is loading more quickly, and because your server is doing less work. That's the important thing to understand here. Your server is doing less work because it doesn't have to render these assets. It goes right to the CDN directly and bypassing your server entirely, the Turbo server. And it makes it much more responsive, much more fast in terms of response times. So so that's it. That's an important optimization. Make sure you do that in your websites, especially on your Turbo sites, because you get the CDN connection for free by default. Otherwise, you'd have to connect it to a custom CDN like a Cloudflare or CloudFront or something like that. So in the next video and the final video, we're just going to do some touch-up work. We're going to finish out this section right here, customize this area for our coffee shop. Going to change the image down here, do some brush-up work, and that should complete the coffee shop tutorial. So Hopefully you got everything working. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back to our coffee shop website tutorial series here on Turbo 360. In this final installment, we're just going to do some touch-up work on these bottom sections right here and right here. We're not going to actually go through many new concepts today. A lot of this will be sort of rehashing a review of the concepts from the first 5 videos. But we should finish this out to make sure that the entire website is customized for our purposes. So I did download a couple images for this tutorial, which as usual you can also download in the description section of this video if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this from the actual Turbo site, just head over to the video 6 description and you will find the image asset download as well. So yeah, basically what we're going to do is we're going to take care of this section right here. We're going to create a section for it in the home JSON configuration, as well as this one down here. And we're going to wrap it up by making sure these are rendering customized data. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to head over to my code and run the local host. And then head over to localhost and make sure everything looks the same. Okay, let's get into it. So here, this section right here, which is basically testimonials, I'm going to change this to like meet the team section. So it'll have a section for the coffee shop owner and a quote from the owner and maybe 1 or 2 partners or an employee or so. So let's go ahead and set that up. Turn off the server and head over to your home JSON. And let's create a new section called team. And the team section will have a header. Let's call this is called the subheader, and we'll just call this the header. So subheader team, and then header meet the team. And then let's head over to our home mustache template, and that's going to be right here below the menu. And that's going to be this section right here. So that's going to be page, team, and then subheader. And then this is going to be page, team, and then header. Let's run that on localhost and make sure that's properly showing up. Team, meet the team. All right, and then we have a slider of what's going to be team members for us. So this is probably rendering as, well, we're going to want that rendered as an array. So we have, let's see here, the carousel and then an item right here. So right here is one team member, here's another, and another, and another. And those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are given to us by the template. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's get rid of everything but the first. So let me try that again because I think I got rid of too much. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we have one left behind, and this guy right here will be what we loop through. So we're going to need a image, a quote, a name, and the position. So this could be like the owner, partner, employee, barista, whatever. Okay, so the key question here is, do we want to use a CMS for this, or do we want to have these just inside the home JSON configuration file? So you can really go either way. There's no right answer here. So the question really becomes, how do you make that decision? Like, how do I decide which way to go? So the CMS is really appropriate for data that's changing like regularly a lot. So a blog would be a good example because you're writing to your blog a lot, or maybe you're deleting posts and things like that. You want to use a CMS for that. The menu items were good for the CMS because theoretically the owner of the shop is going to be changing the menu on a regular basis, so adding a new item or changing the price, maybe changing the description. That's a common thing. So you want to do that through the CMS. Here, if we're talking about the owners or the employees of the team, excuse me, more than likely this isn't going to change very frequently. Of course, it will change from time to time when you add a new member, but it's not going to be like a daily occurrence. It's not going to be a frequent occurrence. So based on that, I'm going to opt towards having this show rendered from the actual configuration file. But if you want to go with the CMS, that's fine. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. So it's a matter of how you see it, the data being sort of rendered or maintained. So let's go with name, image, quote is the other one, quote, and position. Position. And let's go ahead and render that here. So we have, oh wait, before I do that, let's go ahead and loop through it. Don't forget that. So hashtag, because this is a loop, page, team, and then I think we call it people. People. I think members would be a better way to phrase this. So members. Okay, page, team, members. Don't forget to close that loop right there. And then you need a slash for that. And now this loop will go through every item in this array right here. So we have name, image, quote, and position. So I'm going to take the image right here and just paste that like so. And for now, I'm just going to copy the quote from what's already in there because I don't really have a quote prepared for this. Okay, so now we can populate this with the values from the file. So image, and we are going to add the CDN here because we're loading the image from the source code. And then we have the name. We also have the position and then the quote. Okay, let's see how that looks on localhost. Joe, owner, here's the quote, and here's the icon. And we only have one because there's only one element in the array. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and add another one. So don't forget the comma right there. Let's get rid of that. And let's go with Susan. I'm going to assume there's a person too. And let's say this is a co-owner. Okay, and so now we can just do npm run serve. Now we have Joe and Susan. Well, obviously that's not Susan, but you get the idea. Okay, and then you can just add as many as you want. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Let's go ahead and change this background image. So let's do BG. Let's do img background. And I have an image prepared for this right here in the images. That's going to be this one right here, cafe.png. So let's go ahead and add that guy to the public, and then the images folder, and then cafe.png. And let's go ahead and make sure that that looks okay. So that's images, and then cafe.png. That's going to be image background. So that is up here. So we want img background. The CDN is already applied to it right there. So let's go ahead and reload that, see how that looks. Okay, so what I forgot was we need the page and then the team and then the img background. So let's try that again. And there we are. Okay, so now we have our own image in the background here and our two team members. And so now this is fully customized for our own coffee shop. So it's no longer anything from the original theme has been removed, and now it is rendering our own content here, except for these icons, of course, but I'm sure you can figure out how to apply those. Let's go ahead and deploy this and make sure it looks accurate on staging. So you may have forgotten from one of the earlier videos, whenever you make a change to one of the page configuration files, you do turbo, page, and then home, because you have to update the remote context with what you have on local. So don't forget that. It's very easy to forget. So now the home configuration on the remote server has been synced up with what we have here on local, so we can deploy and the data should match up. So let's go ahead and deploy that and let's see what we get. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's go ahead and head over to staging and make sure everything looks good. Very nice. And again, just to refresh your memory, if you one of the key benefits of this page configuration setup is if you want to make a change here where it says meet the team, let's say we want to change that to meet the team exclamation mark, right? All you have to do is change the home config and then turbo page home to update the remote. And then that should be all you need to do. And now we have meet the team. And this is on the staging server, so this is a live update, it's a live change. So that makes it very easy to make small tweaks like that without having to redeploy and all that stuff. So let's finish up with this section down here. This form right here is replacing an order, but you may notice that it says book a table and make a reservation. So for our coffee shop, that doesn't really make sense, right? So we want to change this. So let's go ahead back to our home.json, and we want to create a new section called order. And then this is a subheader right here. So subheader, and then the header. So want to make this place your order. I'll just call this over here order, and then place and order. And then this is already filled out from the form, and we're just going to have this change to an image of another person. I have an image prepared for that in the images folder called barista.jpg. So throw this guy over into the public slash images folder. Just throw that guy over here. And then let's set that up. Images barista.jpg, and that's going to be image background. Okay, so we have subheader, header, and image background, and let's go ahead and change that guy over here. So that's going to be this bottom section right here. I'm just going to remove that extra space. And we have page.order.subheader, page.order.header, and right here we have page.order.img background. I believe that's what we called it. Yep, right here. And the CDN is already connected. So let's go ahead and run that locally. And let's hope that everything is rendering properly. Oh, this is on staging, so make sure you're running on local. Oh, I called it the same name. That's why that's why this one replaced as well. So you're gonna have it down here and over here. Okay, well, that's my mistake. Let's see if we can fix that. So this is barista, and apparently the other one I had from before is also called barista. So I shouldn't have given it the same name. Let's go back to, I'm now on staging. I'm just going to grab this from our staging environment. So just open this up. And this is also called barista. So that's a mistake I made, right? So let's go ahead and change that to, let's grab this from our staging environment. Okay, I just want to quickly check the size. Sometimes this happens. I'm not really sure why, but really we want read-only access over here. Okay, and then this should be now barista 2. Oh, there is a barista 2. Well, we could have just used that actually. So I'm going to make this barista 2, and then back here to barista. And let's see what we get. So head back to the code, and the home JSON should now be barista 2 in the order section, and the top should still be barista like that. And then now we should have both of our images restored. So let's see what happens. Now again, I'm on localhost. So here we have barista 1, and we are using barista 2 over here. I'm sorry, I'm losing track of what the images are called. I should have just called this barista 3. Let's see if we still have barista 2. Let's go ahead and make that change. We do right here. Okay, so let's get it right this time. Barista 3. And this is going to be barista 2. Get that back to normal. And then head back to our home JSON. And let's go with barista 3. And let's see what we get. Barista 1, barista 2, barista 3. There we go. So my apologies, I should have done some prep beforehand, but as you can see, it's a lot of trial and error sometimes before you get everything right. So let's go ahead and throw this up on staging, but don't forget we made some changes to the home JSON configuration file. So we got to do turbo page home and then turbo deploy to make sure everything looks the same on staging as well. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's go ahead and check it out on staging. Looks good, looks good. So far so good. Team page showing Joe and the partner. And there, and the order form still works, or still looks good. So, okay, great. I'm going to call it a wrap here. There's a couple other things that if you want to continue experimenting with this project that should be done. For example, the social media icons we never connected from the config files. They're just hard-coded into the HTML. So you should go ahead and make those changes so that if you want to add more social media icons or remove, as it may be, depending on who's running the coffee shop, that should be an option. Another thing is we didn't actually connect any other pages like the blog or the menu. If you want to actually try connecting the blog using the CMS here for this, that's a good idea. The post model that comes with the CMS right out of the box essentially is meant for a blog. So you can go ahead and just reuse this if you want and reuse it for these purposes. So that's something worth exploring, trying to hook up. Another thing that might be a good challenge is when an order comes in to have it route through an email service to send an email to the owner of the restaurant, to an admin of the restaurant. So these are all things that are, or the coffee shop. These are all things that are worth doing, exploring on your own. And this, I think, this template, this theme looks good enough for an actual project. So if you want to go ahead and actually deploy it and host it on Turbo, it's free to do so. I encourage you to do that, and using the Turbo CMS to update the data and collaborate with other people who may want to actually use this for their own website as well. It's meant to be easy. Oh, by the way, this now renders properly because this is coming from the CDN. So when you make the CDN connection, the page configuration does show up properly. You can update the page config files from here um, by doing this. So this is the same as updating the page configuration from your terminal, although I'm more of a fan of using the terminal. I think this can be a little bit hard to read sometimes, but the CMS is a great tool for updating dynamic data. And so I encourage you to use this and get familiar with it and get comfortable with it so that you can create more dynamic and database-driven websites. Thanks very much for watching this tutorial. Check back in on the tutorials page on Turbo, or just the home page as well, where we'll be posting tutorials, realistic, real-world tutorials like this at least once a week. So this is a good way of gaining some skills and trying to apply concepts in a more realistic type project, like a small coffee shop like this, rather than your standard hello world simple, really simplified projects or tutorial-based projects. Couple other things. We didn't update this from the home JSON config. You should do that. And I think that's it. I think that would be the last missing piece. So yeah, that's it. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and stay tuned for more tutorials like this one. Take care.